It's 12 o'clock in Frisco, Texas, and it's time for Smoker Broker Radio with Robert Mesh, a.k.a. the Smoker Broker. Robert is the owner of Small World Realty and has employed hundreds of real estate agents in his 17-year career. He has instructed and mentored over 10,000 real estate agents at the highly acclaimed Champions School of Real Estate and is considered an expert in Texas residential realty. Robert is also an advocate of true entrepreneurial spirit and has helped many to transition from corporate America into the world of self-employment. And now live from the studio to your world, the Smoker Broker.
Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mesh, and I am the guy they call Smoker Broker. Weird combination of having someone who's a barbecue guy and a real estate broker. Combination of names. No vapes, no marijuana, nothing like that. We get that quite a bit, but it's far from it. It's just a recognized name out of love that a lot of people have called me over the years. But rest assured, I'm a long-time broker, 20 years in the business, and that is what the show focuses in on, is core real estate as to how it affects us. We always start the show off with some current events as to how it affects real estate, but then we get into the subjects of what it is that helps people with real estate. And what's nice about it is it's a blend of across the boards. It is geared more probably towards new agents, but a lot of times we'll have veteran agent conversations, and a lot of this show really helps the general public. You know, one of the things that we found over the few years that we've been doing the show is that a lot of our viewers who are agents will take the show, and if it affects something that's going on in their current transaction, they'll tell the client, hey, look, watch this so you can better understand what I'm trying to tell you. It's not just me. This is someone who has a neutral voice standpoint. As far as neutral on that, God knows I'm not neutral, but neutral on the standpoint of that particular transaction. We have found that that's been very helpful for a lot of viewers who watch the show. You know, we typically average anywhere from 400 to 800 to 1,000 views a week. One thing I always like to point out about our particular podcast is that we do it live, and it's intentional too, but it's the review and podcast that really is watched. We have people that watch all the time. And what I was saying is, a lot of times what I really point out versus a different podcast, most of the people, the views that we have, those are actually people who watched the show, that they actually went through and watched the whole thing. It wasn't just a view where they skipped on it and they said, you know, a lot of podcasts will have 10,000 views or whatever, but it's just because somebody swiped through. And most of our views are people who actually watch that. And we know that because we get a lot of feedback from people who call and email and text us and say, hey, look, I saw the show this week, blah, blah, blah. And the questions they have are geared more towards the end of the show, which means they watched the entire show. So that's always a good sign and feeling for us. And that's why we have continued to do the show for so long. And we'll continue to move on to the future with doing, because we know it helps a lot of people. It reinforces our careers, our name brand. It gets our name out there with a lot of our clients. You know, I typically don't talk as much about my particular group on the show, because I like the show to be general for everybody out there. But we do run the SWR group itself at Keller Williams. It's considered to be one of the largest groups in the country. And there is a reason for that, because a lot of the things we do reinforce our team members. And this show actually happens to be one of them. Be shocked how many recruits actually watch our show. It's very common for me during an interview for someone to say, well, you know, I watched your show about whatever, that was 3 or 4 months. So we have a lot of people who, I like to say, they kind of cyber stalk us. They kind of go back through and check us out. So it's something that's very worthwhile for us. We enjoy doing it, and we enjoy all the comments we get about people who are helping us. You know, I always bring some of my crew on. I don't like doing this by myself. And I love the two that I have today, because I don't get to have them on as much. You know, I always feel bad. Me and Brent do the show a lot, because me and Brent are responsible financially to run SWR, and I don't like bothering a lot of my agents at times, but there's only a few that I let come on the show that have been with me for a while and that I trust from an attitude standpoint and an operational standpoint. So I don't near as much get to have these two on. And for once, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, because I always am the one that does it. I'd like them to talk, because they never get to do it. So y'all go ahead. Start off. Start over here on this side here.
This side, Richa? All right. Hi, guys. My name is Richa Gupta. I've been with Robert. We're not going to discuss how many years.
It's a while.
It's been a very, very, very long time. I really thoroughly enjoyed my real estate experience with him, my experience that I had before that. Really, this is the cream of the crop. You guys are getting the gold nuggets of real estate here. And any question you have, anyone that has been trained by him in his firm that has been a top agent or not can answer your questions, because he knows what he's doing, how to teach it, and how to teach it well. So,
well, something I'm more proud of is just the product of someone like you that after years doesn't need it as much and becomes such a well-groomed agent. And Rich is always so modest. She never talks about any of her things as much because she views herself as a wife and a mother first many times of what she does. But it's so annoying. She has to be one of the most irritating real estate agents because she has more capability, and she knows I say this all the time, she has more capability than almost all of my agents as far as being just a mega agent if she wanted to, but she picks and chooses. And the reason why I say that is because I love that she knows that she does what she needs to do. And I hate the fact that so many people who probably know her probably don't realize how good of a real estate agent she is. And I'm not just talking about a good real estate agent from a luxury level. She is a very competent real estate agent. And it's Richard, I think if she doesn't have all of her other stuff going on, you probably see her on billboards, selling real estate in some of the hardcore areas in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I love it. She's always so modest with it. I love it when she's able to take time, because you're going to get a lot of insight from her. And as much as I love her, my agent down here, Banu, is something I love just as much and in different ways. So Banu, introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be on Smoker Broker Radio. My name is Banu Hanawara, and I've been with Robert ever since I graduated out of Champions as well. And it's been a wonderful journey so far from SWR Realty, now with Keller Williams, Frisco Stars. I think it's just an amazing group, an amazing broker, as Richa said. Everything I've learned or what I've become today is totally because of his training. I absolutely love real estate. It's my passion. I do it full time, and it's just I never thought it would be something I love, but I absolutely love it. And given today's market, I think it's where I would want to be more than ever. So I'm very happy. Thanks, Robert, for having me on the show. I appreciate it so much.
And Bon, too. He's a rock star real estate agent.
I agree.
Bonnie, and I was just about to say a very, very similar pitch that I was giving Richa and Banu. They're very similar in different ways, but I tell you, anybody who watches the show, especially peers of them or their friends or their family, if you haven't figured it out, which you should, because anybody who knows these two individuals knows that's how they are. But Banu's outgoing spirit, the way she is, her friendly, what I love about Banu more than anything, and more than any of my agents as well, is that we always tell everybody that the perfect real estate agent, and this is actually a good takeaway for the show. We're talking about introductions. I always try to make takeaways from the show because that's what's important about it. When we're looking for good agents, and I guess I have the street cred to say that I've recruited thousands over the years. One thing that I look at and I'm very careful about is, you have the really personal, outgoing agent, the hi, my Bob, bubbly, whatever. And you want that agent because you want someone who's outgoing and that people react to and that they want to be a part of. But this person, typically that's all they are. They're nothing else. They have no spine. They can't put their foot down. They can't address ridiculous situations. All right. And then you have this agent, very competent, knows everything, knows how to discipline, not be pushed around, but just a jerk, just an absolute jerk. Most people are like, oh, that person, I don't want to deal with it. What we're looking for is someone who's right in between. And we want the person that absolutely can be, hi, how are you? How are you doing? But also is like, I have had enough. I go, this is not going to happen anymore. It's hurting my client. It's hurting the process. And that's what she is. She's exactly like that. And she's had to learn it over the years, not the personal side, but the more abrupt side. And I like to think it's because we talk through these things a lot. I won't tell you what I tell my agents as far as how to address something, because I'm far worse when it comes to being more blunt. But I do it because I hope they get just a little bit of it, because I want them to have that backbone when they go on. And she is very good at that, which that's not just a compliment for her. It's more of a compliment for her and what she does for her clients. Because I'm telling you, those of you who get to see this with her, she is very good in the trenches. She knows exactly what to do. And the best part, and even years doing this, and you got to be pushing somewhere between 6 to 10 years or so, and I have to look, but even all that time, she knows that she still asks if she's questioned on it. She knows almost 99% of the time, she knows the right answer, but she makes sure. And that's what I love about her too, is that she knows none of us are perfect. None of us are perfect by any means. And even with all the experience I have, I don't know everything. I make mistakes still, but I love the fact that she asked. And I don't think anybody could hope for better agents, both of them here. I love it when they're on the show. And again, I don't put them on as much because I don't want to bother them. And me and Brent are responsible for it. But well, when I do like to put them on there, it's exciting because it's just a different show. Plus, everybody else gets to see a different view of some of our agents out there. So thank y'all for that. Always love your time. We've been starting the show off with some type of conversation about COVID and how it affects real estate since March. We are going to do today. It's going to be quicker, though, than I normally do. We've gotten to where we talk a lot about it because it affects so much of what we do, and it's still necessary. But a couple quick comments, and we were talking about it before we went on air, and I enjoyed the conversation. If we're talking about current events today, a super significant event yesterday, new president is in office now. Doesn't matter what you think. Doesn't matter whether you're happy, sad, angry, or what. It doesn't matter. And we have a new president, and it's a new day and a different administration and a different way of looking at things. Some people are thrilled. Some people are not. Doesn't matter what side it is. But what does matter is the policies that are being put in place right now and how it's going to affect real estate. And we have a president and we had a former president that no doubt want to address the issue of making sure that this is taken care of. It's just a time thing. And we were joking about the interesting comments this morning and yesterday about how it almost seems that people thought it would just mythically go away with an administration change. That's not going to happen. It's not. And thankfully, we've said that on the show for months now. There is no change to COVID with the administration change. It's fuming out there right now, and it's very hard to put a stop to it. It's very somber for a lot of people out there, including our personal friends and family. Richa and Banu's personal friends and family. We've all experienced it. And one thing that's also certain too, we're talking about this as well. Even people who have constantly been like, oh, it's no big deal. I don't even know anybody that has it. It's not that much of a big deal. Even all of those people over the last couple of months, there's been no two ways about it. They know damn good and well it's out there. I don't think there's anybody we know now that doesn't have it or has had it or has been affected by it. And that number's growing. They were reflecting on the CDC's numbers before the call that they're expecting 100,000 deaths in the next 2 weeks. Now, God knows that's awful. But again, keep in mind, those are backlog numbers for December. The travel that was done, the amount of people that contracted the virus, which is really high, which is really super high. It's not going away. And the policies that are being put in place still need to be adhered to. Now, as negative as that sounds, and there's nothing been really positive about COVID. But I will say this, and this is something we didn't have a conversation about before, and I wanted to continue it for the start of the show because it does affect what's going to happen to us and all businesses here in the next 6 months. You do have a few things going for you right now, okay? One, and it's the one that most people don't really recognize, there's a lot of people that do have it and have had it, and they're immune to it for a good amount of months. They say it's 3. I still believe it's more, but who knows? They can't track it. But 3 months for sure. So you have a lot of the people over the last, since probably November that have caught it, that are currently immune to it and that have antibodies towards it. So that's a big chunk of the population. What is it? I can't remember the numbers. Is the 26 million? I can't remember how many that have contracted it. Well, if those people have had it, they're currently immune to it. So that's one side that's not causing any more problems right now. Of course, you've had 12 million, or I can't remember, there's 35 million that have been vaccinated or that's out. It's something, there are Americans that have been vaccinated at this point. In fact, in my personal life right now, I don't know of any frontline worker, nurse, police officer, fire department, that's a friend of mine. I have a lot of those types of friends that have not been vaccinated. So that says to me that has been done. And almost everybody I know who is in age over 70 and has somewhat of a health issue, they've been vaccinated too. Now, these are my friends, and but I like to think that's not coincidence. I will tell you, I don't know anybody in my personal circle that doesn't meet those requirements that has said they haven't got it yet. So you have those people that have it. Now, there's still millions of other Americans that don't have it and won't have it for a while, but it's fighting something that hasn't been fought before. And now those are less of a chance for some of the people to get it, which brings us into the final. The ones that are still apt to have it, it still has to remain into the rules that are put in place. 6 feet, mask on, avoiding massive gatherings, which I'm going to say something very hypocritical in a second, because that's another reason I wanted to start the show off. But I'm going to spin it in a good way. All those things still apply. I will tell you also on a personal matter, just listening to people and the amount of friends and the amount of contacts that we have, one common thread that I've seen, if they're in a car with somebody else, you better believe you've got it. There is just absolutely no way that you're going to ride with someone that has that and you're going to get away from it. And that's something that really should be being watched as well. The amount of people you're driving with, whether they have had it recently and whether they've been vaccinated. I think those are probably pretty important questions friends. I don't ask a stranger that, but I think that's probably important to know, because that's a real good way to pass it. And I think that still happens. All right, one more comment, because we can talk forever about this, but I'm going to say something that I was personally involved in this week that I found interesting. So we haven't had any of our events in a long time. Our smoking events and all that, obviously they were curtailed because of COVID. So they had our first one. Really not barbecue, it was more chili, which I hate chili. I'm the worst chili cook. I don't know why, I just hate it. But nonetheless, we had our first event down in Galveston this past weekend. And it's the first time that they had opened up where it was going to be a public event, which I was really shocked by. I was shocked by it, especially Galveston is really connected to Houston. 7 million people, probably not a good idea, right? So they had it. We went down there. Now, it was easier for me. Actually, I told everybody last week, and I don't mind telling everybody again. We had it in December, the whole family, same time. So we do have a 3-month immunity to it, unless there's something weird that they haven't told us yet. And it made me a little more comfortable. Like, well, I'll go down, but it didn't change my philosophy on whether it was a good idea or not, right? So we go down. The event is not near as big as it used to be. It literally is 70% scaled down, right? Which that was good. But it was still on the main drag there. They quartered off a parking lot, and they only allowed, I don't know why I say only, but they only allowed 50 people in at a time, right? So you have these people that are going booth to booth. Now, what I found amazing is that we actually served it to them. We actually put it in a cup and pushed it to them. And, what was amazing to me is how many people came to it. Because I sure hope the people that came to it either had already had it or were vaccinated for it. Because if they didn't, you talk about the biggest gamblers in the face of this earth. Look, the masks are told to be on. It's just like everything. Every time you turn around, someone's mask is below their nose, or worse, they just didn't have it on. They're talking. I don't know if y'all want to be gross or not, but if you don't understand the aerosol effect, just go watch somebody talk when they're in the sunlight, and that every single thing off them shows. Even this simple conversation, just aerosols with beads everywhere. Anybody that's at those events that's talking, those things are going into that. And I was just like, God, I'm surprised that was something they did. And I was mixed, because I know they're trying to get back on track socially. By the way, it's for big charity. It's not just because they do it for the hell of it. It's for big charity. They're losing a lot of money on the charity, so they're trying to balance the line. But I tell you, I was there, but I don't like being hypocritical at all. But I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, this is terrible. Like, this is not something that I would condone to anybody to do. So those are out there, right? They're out there, and it's going to continue. It does affect the way we do our real estate business from an operational standpoint and from a conversation standpoint as to how does it affect sales and all that. But obviously sales have been through the roof with real estate, so it's not as much of a big a deal for us, but it's still out there. I'm going to end that conversation with exactly what Banu and I think Richa even said as well. It does appear as we get closer to the end of the year, there's better hope. And there's better hope. And this is my whole point for this entire 10-minute conversation for business in general, because this is an entrepreneurial show too. This isn't just focused on real estate. I'm big on people being self-employed, so it matters. But it does look like if they continue their path, we do, and it's also the reason why I talked about this event, not just because it was one of my events, because you have these people who are slowly trying to get back on track. And as we get closer to the mid part to the end of the year, you're going to see more of that. I think even the head virus, I think Dr. Fauci said we're looking at letting stadiums go back in the fall, which I don't know about that, but it means for every small business owner out there, everyone is just holding on right now, and they are too. It does show if you can make it just a few more months, you might just be able to withstand it. And I think that's important too, because I'll tell you, the one thing that's broke my heart in this entire damn thing, I mean, outside of people dying, I don't think I have to state the obvious, but I tell you, when I drive by these days and see the vacated commercial spots, especially the smaller business one, I cannot stomach it. It's so awful. You know, all we do is we track counts of deaths, but we don't track the loss of the businesses and how that's affected lives. And God, you want to go into another realm, you know, the mental health of this country right now and this world. Whew, I don't even want to see the studies in the next year or so as to how bad that's been affected. So anyways, enough that it does affect us. Is why we talk about it. We've done it on many of the shows, but it's important too. We are going to talk about one of the most important real estate concepts. In fact, it's one of the biggest foundation pieces of real estate is understanding the difference between real property and personal property. Now, you might think that that's just, hey, what big deal? What's the problem with that? Actually, it affects everything that we do, because it's the starting point of everything that we do from a contract standpoint, from a negotiation standpoint. So it does affect a lot of people. Now, what's also awesome about this particular show is that, and we mentioned it earlier, this show actually is going to be very beneficial for new agents, maybe veteran agents, but veteran agents should know this stuff already. But more important, the general public, the clients that we have out there that are listing and that are prepared to buy. This is a very good show for you right now to understand these differences, because you're going to need to know them very soon as you go under contract. So hopefully this is going to be well worth your while as we go through some of these examples over the next 30 to 40 minutes or so on what we're discussing here. All right. First thing it's important about this is understanding the difference between the two. Understanding why it's important to know, because when we draft contracts, we have to use certain contracts. Now, I'm going to put Rich and Banu on the spot, and they don't like being asked questions because they might answer the wrong way, but that's okay too, because we still learn off of each other as well when we do this. Y'all, when we look at the contract, the family contract, it's called a residential 1-4, right? Right? What is it that contract actually moves when we look at property? Does it move real property or does it move personal property?
Real property.
Real property.
It's real. Yeah, it's real. I saw that you were trying to talk, but they didn't know the answer, by the way, everybody. They were on mute there.
No, I didn't want to interrupt Banu if she was saying something. I didn't want to speak over her. That's why I took my time to make sure. Yes.
Yeah. It's real property.
Real
okay?
property.
Real property. We don't transfer personal property on a 1-4 contract. Okay. This is also a really good show for a agent in training right now that's about to take the test, because as most of you all know, I'm a longtime instructor in Texas real estate. And I will tell you right now, that is a big piece of the exam, understanding that concept. So this will be good for you as well. So it's a real property contract, right? Now, That's important because we have to know the difference between real property and personal property if we're going to use a real property contract, right? So when we go through, let's start talking about some of the examples of real property versus personal property. And then it'll kind of take a toll as to why it's so important for an agent to be able to identify which one's which and what we do with it and how it affects our negotiations. Okay, so let's talk about let's think about a picture on the wall. Okay, let's say you have actually one of these pictures. You got a picture, these pictures right here, right? They're just on nails. Okay, if we sell this house today, it's an office, but let's say we sell it. If we sell this house today, that picture is personal property. I can take it. It's not hooked on. I can take it and remove it off the wall and take it with me. When we sell this house, that's going with me. Nothing has to be said about it. Okay, that's a good example of personal property. However, let's say that this, let's pretend these window blinds are a flat screen or something, and that's attached to the wall. So two things about flat screens, because most TVs today are all flat screen or some type of LCD lateral. Most of your TVs are on a J-hook, all right? The J-hook is embedded into the wall. It's screwed into the wall, meaning if you took that J-hook down, it would rip a massive hole in the wall, right? Most people have a TV that slips on and off that hook, right? Which means that most of your TVs are personal property because you can go in, take them off, move them away without destructing any type of property or removing any type of real fixture, okay? Now, the stand absolutely is real property because it's attached in such a way that if you take it down, it's going to leave a massive gaping hole into the wall. That J-hook is what we refer to as a fixture. And a fixture is something that has become a part of the house, which means if we sell that house, it's staying with it. Okay, those are good takeaways. They're a little elementary to some extent, but it's elementary in the fact you need to know what we're going to have to do in a minute, which is much more advanced the way we look at it. Okay, so we're starting simple and going more advanced. So those things are out there, and it's affected by the way they are attached to one. I'll give you a secret too, or a little tip. When it comes to determining whether something is a fixture, meaning it's a part of the house, the good rule of thumb is if you take it down and it leaves a gaping hole, it probably was a fixture to the home. Okay, you can get a little confused when you have a little bracket that is into the wall, but most things that are attached inside the wall, that if you took it, scraped it or pushed it out, not like a nail, but anything else, most of the time it would be considered a fixture. Okay.
I think
go back to Richard.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Good Lord, I'll talk to you.
I was going to say, when people, I think the confusion ends up happening when, I think when you overcomplicate the concept of real property versus personal property, and like you said, property, anything that is attached to the land, attached to the house, if removing it is not going to cause damage to, said real property, then you can take it.
Right.
I think examples become things like sheds that people build outdoors, or like built-in refrigerators. Okay, so a built-in refrigerator is a built-in refrigerator, and it is part of the house like a cabinet. You're not going to rip out this one section of cabinetry and take it with you. If it's a freestanding fridge that fits in a cutout space that's allotted for a fridge, that's personal property. You can take that with you. So
Richard, that's a good takeaway. We always try to point out the takeaways, and that's on my list today. One of the takeaways here, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit as well, are refrigerators. Believe it or not, refrigerators, the number one piece of personal property item that's negotiated in a contract. Now, Rich also pointed out something that's really important, that there are some houses that have a Sub-Zero fridge that's already built in.
Yeah, that's a built-in.
That's like built-in. But I'm glad you brought it up, because that's exactly what we're talking about. You have to know the difference. You have to understand. And what I love about that example is that it's complicated because most refrigerators are personal property. Most of the refrigerators you see in a house are personal property, which means they do not stay. except if it's a Sub-Zero, because it's attached. The other ones aren't attached. You can unplug them and move them. A Sub-Zero, you have to yank it out of the entire thing.
I had a similar issue with a real estate transaction with a shed. So outdoor, storage units that people purchase. If it's a storage unit, you can move without causing damage to the land or a giant gaping hole or whatever. That's yours to take, right? If it's a freestanding box you purchase and put on the land. Now, if you bought, like when you're buying, the wood and the concrete and all of that, yeah, that's personal property. But if you pour a concrete pad to put a shed on top of, that is now real property. You can't take that with you until you dig up the foundation and damage the existing property. So like shed, a built-in fridge. And I think a lot of times people get confused when you use the word fixture, because in our common language, we use a fixture as like, oh, that's a light fixture.
Yeah, right. Okay. So that's a good point. That's actually a really good point that I don't talk about a lot. And I should. That actually is confusing, because when you refer to fixture, you think of light fixture. I'm like, well, yeah, but you could consider a pool a fixture too, but we don't say the pool's a fixture. So that's actually a really intelligent comment that I haven't thought of over the years when I'm talking about this topic. I mean, y'all, I've talked about this topic thousands of times over the years and taught it. So it's interesting when someone puts a different perspective. I'm like, that's actually a good way to explain it, going, you can't get confused if you look at it from a fixture. You really should be looking at it from the theoretical standpoint of, if you take that down, what's it going to do with it?
You hire a professional real estate agent to help you through this. This.
That's right. That is why you bring in an agent, because you don't want to be guessing on it. So there's another takeaway from the show, and I like that she put that in there too. We constantly preach about the need for an expert. Yes, we're biased because we're the ones that are the experts that do it, but we constantly tell the general public, you really shouldn't do this on your own. And some of them are like, I can do it on my own. I'm like, you think you can, but you don't. Even these type of simple things. This is a great example. And by the way, anybody who's watching right now, I'm going to tell you, this is a great takeaway if you get involved in something like this. When we talk to a lot of our agents about how to negotiate with a for sale by owner and capture a for sale by owner, because sometimes they can be difficult. So this is a big subject that we have. This great takeaway. When you talk to a for sale by owner, one of the things you probably should consider sometimes, throw an example at them to see if they know what to do with it. Meaning, say something like, well, hey, look, what are y'all doing with that media screen, that media projector that's attached into the wall right now? They're like, oh, well, we're taking it. It's ours. I'm like, you sure? They're like, well, yeah, I bought that. But I'm like, yeah. I go, you bought it, but then you attached it in such a way that you put it and anchored it into the wall, and you made it a part of the house. You know what happened with X versus X? I won't name the names of the actual case itself. I go, you know what happened in that court case? I go, someone took the projector and they wouldn't give it back. The projector was worth like $6,000. And guess what the buyer did when the seller wouldn't give it back? Guess who they called? The police. And guess what they filed on the owner of that property, who actually did own that projector at a time? Guess what they charged him with? Theft. Guess what kind of theft they charged him with? Wow. Because of the amount. A felony. They actually view it as stealing because they took something that was a part of the house that wasn't theirs because they sold it, but they didn't know. Now, I like to do that with the for sale by owner. And I don't use that example. I use a lot of other examples. But the point I'm making to you is, see how they respond. The reason why this show is important, there are many facets that are important about the real versus personal property. This is one that you're, with your knowledge, that you can actually use to a for sale by owner. You throw that out there, see how they respond, which I promise you it's going to be wrong. And when they do acknowledge it's wrong, go, see, that's what I'm talking about. Go, that's 1 out of 1,000 things that you and I could talk about right now that could get you in trouble. And for one person, actually got them charged with the felony. You would have never even known. Now, if they want to get smart with you, go, you want to do another one? Because over time, you're going to keep having examples. There's going to be more and more examples of things that they don't understand. So that is a good tip when you're dealing with someone who thinks that they can do it on your own. Use your real. Who would have thought today you're learning about real versus personal property, and you would have a tip that you can actually utilize on your for sale by owner. So that's a good one. That's a good script to use on one of them. Banu, she was talking about these sheds. We see some of those sheds. When you see a shed, what are the two different ways you see those sheds? How do they look to you? There's two different ways those sheds can be. And Richard was talking about it, but be more specific. When you look at a shed, what can it be like? What can it look like?
It could be just one of those, like doesn't have the solid foundation.
There you go.
That doesn't have the cement foundation, but it's just one of those Rubbermaid things that
Perfect.
can just be moved around.
That's exactly where I'm going with this. All right. So we see those, right? We see the Rubbermaids out there. They're annoying to put together. God knows I put some of those things together, but it's a shed. It covers things. It puts a lot of stuff out there, right? But it's not attached. It's not attached in such a way.
It might be anchored. That's the problem.
All right. So look, that's why they come on the show.
It needs to be anchored, right? Because
they know what I'm going to say. And that's why they're on here. Because
it could be anchored, but that does not mean it has been fastened. Just like you can't pick up a physical home and move it because it's solidified and built into the foundation.
Yeah. The reason why that's important, the way she's saying that,
different.
is she's using legal terminology with the anchor. The anchor is the key. If it has been anchored into like maybe a cement pier, then it does get classified as real property. And it does stay. Good real estate agents, when they're looking at the house the first time, they'll scan the backyard. And there are a couple other items that we have to look at. So we'll look at that shed. Good agents will look at the seller and say, hey, is it anchored or not? Most of them are going to say, no, it's not. Which is funny because most sheds are personal property, but most people don't take the shed because it's a pain in the ass, right? So that's kind of interesting. Most of them are personal. But and the ones you really have to be careful of, and Banu was talking about it, it can have a cement foundation, but if it's not attached to that foundation, it's not real property. It has to be attached to it. And that's what Rachel was getting into talking about anchoring. So there are technicalities to some of these things. While we're in the backyard, let's look at some other things that cause issues. We see the play sets constantly become those expensive ones, those ones that are like $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000 or $5,000. And it's funny how we have to deal with this one because this goes both ways. Most of those are typically anchored because they're very expensive and they have ties that are pieces of the equipment that have to be anchored down so the thing can't move. So most of them are anchored, and it's a pretty big piece of equipment in the backyard. Now, this is why this knowledge is so great because you have to go back and forth with it. The reason why that's so important is not a matter so much of if it's staying because of the value. It becomes a matter of, does the buyer want it to stay? And if the buyer doesn't want it to stay, they don't want to be the ones that have to get rid of it. So this becomes a conversation on, hey, is that thing anchored or not? And second, do you guys plan on taking it? They either answer, well, no, it's anchored down, so it's part of the house. Then the buyer can negotiate. I don't want to be the one that takes it down. So then they can go back and forth on that. Or the seller says, I do want to take it. And the buyer's like, you know what? That's fine by me. Even though it's supposed to stay, you guys can take that. We see this with the trampoline sometimes too, which is so stupid. But what's interesting about the trampolines, you would think that trampolines are completely personal property, but what does almost every trampoline these days have because of the danger of them? They're anchored down. They anchor them into the ground. So a lot of people would suggest that the trampoline's a real piece of property the way it's been anchored. You wouldn't think it. And a lot of the buyers are like, I don't want it. You know where we also see this too? These are really good takeaways, by the way, because we're going through some of the things that we see all the time. The other one that kind of falls into that category are the spas, like the plug-in spas.
Above ground.
Yeah, above ground. Thank you. Above ground.
Above ground, like hot tubs.
Right.
Or they just have it.
What do most?
Or they're just sitting in the porch, right under the porch cover.
Banu, what's your opinion of? Because I want you to kind of surprise the listeners. What's your opinion of what most of the buyers? How do they feel about one of those spas? Do you think they like it or do they not like it? They don't like it. They don't. Banu's adjusting to not having to talk because she's having some technical difficulties there. No, they don't like it. and that's an expensive piece of equipment. It's amazing how many buyers will tell you, I want it out. Like, you sure? They're like, yeah. The funnier part, if you want the professional part of this, the reason why they don't want it is they're grossed out that it's somebody else's spa. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. I mean, it's not like the same water is going to be in there once you take it or anything. I'm sure it's been chlorine plated, but most of the people will tell you they're disgusted by it. That's why they don't want the spa.
Who are these people purchasing a spa and not cleaning it? You're disgusting.
I'm telling you, I cannot count the amount of times we've had to, we've been asked, hey, do y'all know anybody can get rid of this for us? In fact, if I was smarter years ago, I would have started a company that, as a real estate agent, since we see it so much, start collecting those damn things and sell them off the side, because I cannot count how many people say, I don't want it in there. So these are plugged in above ground. Most of the time, they are not considered real property either. But here's the thing, and this is what you should be catching during these conversations. It's the knowledge that you have to know of what, if it is or if it's not real property or personal property. But then there's a second conversation. Well, if it is or if it isn't, are they actually going to keep it, or do they want to keep it? Another fun conversation in real estate. And we'll actually mix in a negotiating tip in here, even though it's not part of the show. I love it when a seller is negotiating with us and you're on the buy side and the pool table comes up. So, the pool table is personal property, but a lot of people think because of its size and its dollar amount that they always clarify, hey, is the pool table staying or not, right? So I love it when a seller will try to negotiate the pool table, and they'll say, well, you know what? Instead of we're kind of stuck on this 325 number. How about y'all just give us 326, 327, and we'll leave the pool table. Now, a very good veteran agent. This is a good takeaway for a new agent too, because this is how you get pushed around if you're a new agent. A very good veteran agent would be like, how about I let you pay me so that you don't have to move the damn thing, because it's more expensive to move it than it is to go buy a new one. And it's funny when a seller negotiates their pool table, because any pool table owner will tell you, and I mean 98% of them, they play it once or twice in the entire lifetime and they never use it again. And it sits there until that house is moved or someone gets divorced and they finally make it go away. No seller wants to usually move their own pool table. It is extremely rare. So I love it when a seller
so heavy.
Get that in, like, yeah, the other way. What's that, Richa?
They're just so heavy. They're finicky. It's like any other piece of furniture. It doesn't stay with the house. It's like you say, oh yeah, I'll throw in the couch. Oh, I don't want your couch.
Well, the other thing about the pool table, it depends what type of pool table it is. Some of them are built with 3 types of slates, so that's 3 separate pieces. Some of them can't go down a stairwell, so they have to ratchet them over, which costs more. So I love it when someone talks about when they're discussing their negotiating skills in there. That's kind of funny. I want to go back to the flat screen TV, because that's one that I like to discuss because it happens so much, and it's probably one of the more modern day issues that we have. So we made it clear on what's personal and what's real on the TV, but what we didn't talk about are those of you who cut the sheetrock, put the TV inside the sheetrock, picture frame it, and run the wires behind it so it's just like a perfect square and it's by itself. Most courts would argue the way you attached it, because you didn't put it on a hook, you put it into the wall and picture framed it. Most courts would argue that you've made it real property. Now, the reason why this is super important, that 99.55555% of the general public, they deem to be their TVs that it's their own personal property. And when this subject comes up, a seller gets very defensive. They're like, oh, no. It's my TV. And I'll tell you why I think they get defensive, because most of those people spent like a weekend where they spent 16 hours trying to get that thing put up, and finally liked that, probably almost got divorced over it or alienated somebody because of the hate that was pushed through. They've become attached to this TV, not from a physical standpoint, but from an emotional standpoint. So they think it's theirs, but in reality, it's not. It's not. So you really have to be strong in understanding how is it attached. The real takeaway from the show when it's looking at real versus personal, how is it attached? Now, what did they do with this? That one TV slides on and off the J-hook, but that one doesn't look like it's on a J-hook. That one's on the wall. Richard?
I was going to say, I think, so the simplest way, I think, again, because we're advocates for our clients, right? They don't know the jargon, and they don't realize that the documents that we're signing sometimes, I mean, they are, but they don't realize that these are legal binding documents.
Right.
So when there's a section that says I'm purchasing the property as is, right? So one of the things that says as is when I came and saw the property, this is what it looked like. When I come in as a new buyer, that does not mean that I purchased the property with a giant, 36, 50-inch gaping hole in the drywall.
That's right. That's right. And, so
that TV, great, but you need to repair. That repair needs to look identical to whatever was left there. You can take it, but you have to make that repair. You can't leave. No new homeowner is going to walk in the house and be like, oh yeah, I guess they picked a TV. I'll just redo the drywall.
So let's talk about that too. And that's, again, why I love how our show is unscripted. And I will brag about our show too. And KBGI Media that produces our show, and all the people that we're affiliated with when it comes to this type of podcast. There are tons of podcasts out there, and they're all done fancy, and they're cut to where they're premiere and stuff. This one, it's live. We don't script it. We are not making things. We are going through it, talking like we are being asked these types of questions. And I like that because you get more real answers. You don't have a script that you're following to make it more stuffy. You get real answers that just like you are a regular person in this industry listening to. And to me, that's a more effective way to learn. Plus, it takes a lot more guts to be on live versus taped. So you actually have to go through, because anything we do really can't be erased. Well, I mean, I can ask Mark to go through and cut that section out, but I've never done it before. But she is mentioning something that is a different light of this when it comes to the way we negotiate these things. Richard, what was the last thing you said? Because it was more important than the comment I wanted to make. What was it you were talking about?
When you're purchasing the property, there's a portion of our contract.
Oh, I got it. I remember.
The property as is.
So she took what wasn't scripted, which is why I got off on that. She took what wasn't scripted in the show, and she made a sidebar of it that actually is important to whether it's real or personal property. So this is a problem that happens a lot. And honestly, it happens so much that they probably need to address in the contract, because we've been telling them for years something should be in there. She's talking about when people leave the little knickknacks left, meaning when you take all your pictures down, there's nails. A lot of people leave the nails in the wall. In fact, I would tell you the majority of the people do, which I'll offend some people here. Hell, even maybe Banu and Richard, maybe they've done it too. But if you've left the nails before, that's kind of not a cool thing to do, because they're your nails and they're not putting stuff up on your nails. And you really should have taken those things down. It looks like crap. Yeah. And they put holes in the wall, right? Now there's all these holes. Now here's the tricky part though. And it's a catch-22. Let's say you do the right thing. You take the nails down, and when you take the nails down, you're like, oh damn, there's holes in the wall. So like, well, now maybe I need to patch it. So then you go patch it, and there's all these white specks in the wall. Now some people will be like, well, at least I patched them. But now the wall has all these white specks on it. And then the conversation becomes, well, you should have painted that. I'm like, well, if I paint that, then I have to paint the whole damn room. So this is a tricky sidebar that we go through when we're dealing with real versus personal property, because this one comes up. And she mentioned the as is. That's another one that's interesting. As is does refer to when we went in there the first time, what did the house look like? If someone goes in there and has all these nails on the wall, and they taken these pictures off, and the nails actually are a physical eyesore, did the house actually look like that when we purchased it? You could say it was there, but to say it looked like that, no. And the ones that did take something down where it left a hole in the wall, that one you're like, well, that clearly isn't the way that we purchased this house. So this is it might seem like a simple subject, but it's not. Let's see what did Brent say. Can I take the front door with me? Yes, very good. What's funny about Brent's comment is that
it comes up. It's a real question. It does. Like a real question.
It does. And I always quote, I'm the king of B-rated movies, like movies that nobody else would watch, but they're so stupid that they make me laugh because that's the type of humor I am. I'm like, that's so ridiculous. Well, there's a movie from it was either late 80s or early 90s called Moving with Richard Pryor. If you're a real estate agent, it's a must because it's the most ridiculous movie. Believe me, anybody who watches this is going, I'll never get that hour and a half back in my life. But the one funny part in the movie that affects real estate agents, it's not the one funny part, but when they're buying the house, they go through and they're walking it, and the owner's being a jackass, and he says, yeah, I built these myself, these cabinets in there. And the buyer's like, oh, I love them. He's like, well, don't get too used to them because I'm taking them with me. And they start laughing or whatever. And he does this throughout the whole house. And then when he moves in, all the shit's taken out. So he calls him. He's like, hey, he goes, where is all this stuff? He goes, you've taken, he goes, no. He goes, I got it all right here. I got the whole conversation taped. I told you every one of those things that I was taking. So it's kind of a funny conversation because whereas that's so stupid, there is some reality to, hey, you were supposed to leave that, which takes us into our next conversation. That was a big piece of this, are the surround sound speakers. Cannot tell you, and I mean this, also shows how long I've been doing it too. I cannot tell you the amount of times I've actually seen physical fights break out over speakers. You would think that we would get into more altercations when we're off by 100,000 people are being jerks with negotiations, right? I see more altercations with a $200 or $300 speaker system than I do with those because it becomes a personal thing. Banu, go through what can happen. Make up some scenarios when it comes to speakers of what can happen the right way or what can happen the wrong way. Tell us a little bit about what you see when you see speakers, what's happened before, what can happen.
Oh my God, I have seen so many.
She starts off with, oh my God, I love it.
So I had this buyer buy a home in Little Elm, map to Frisco ISD, and the media room had all these speakers and a projector and everything. And they had said in the offer in the MLS that the media room, the projectors would stay with a good price, right? And when I put in the offer, in the non-realty addendum, I had already put the projector screen and the speakers and everything. And they accepted it. The offer was signed, and we are going through the whole process and everything. And we go for our final walkthrough, and the speakers are gone. I mean, they've left the projector, the screen, and they've taken the speakers and the subwoofer. And my client is just like, that's it, Banu, I'm not going to close on this house. I need the speakers. It's in the contract. I mean, how can I watch TV without speakers? I said, whoa, okay.
An important takeaway right here. Well, important. There's so many takeaways in this one. The main one for real estate agents out there, if that doesn't resonate, why you absolutely have to do a walkthrough, then you're not paying attention. Notice that she did the walkthrough specifically so she could catch anything that was done like that. And I'll be damned, the speakers are gone. My guess, they weren't cheap speakers either. Okay. Now, if you want to ask the follow-up questions to that, those of you who are who watch on podcast, the follow-up question there is, well, what do you do then? The professional response as a buying agent is to contact the listing agent going, hey, speakers are gone. Per the contract, they are supposed to stay. Those things need to be back in before we close. That's what should happen. And if the seller's smart, they'll go right back in there and put those things in there because they're going to get a lot of trouble if they don't. That's what should happen. Time is, of course, an issue. Inconvenience is somewhat of an issue. Sometimes they're already on their way to Minnesota, and they just can't do it. Then the next conversation becomes, you need to compensate us for it, though. And we need to see the compensation before we close so that we can judge whether that's going to be out. Because not only do we want compensation for the speaker, we want compensation for the install because we are not going to be the ones that do that. And then you get the one that we can't do any of this today, but we'll make sure that it happens. Meaning you're going to close and you hope that happens. By the way, that's something you should never agree to. You don't ever agree. It has to be fixed prior to for a majority of the items out there. So that is an excellent one. She also mentioned another good takeaway. Like I said, there's 1,000 takeaways in what she said. But the other one was the media room. The media room causes so many problems. There's so much money in it. Most media rooms have anywhere from 20 to 40K worth of equipment that is personal, that could be considered real property or vice versa, depending on how they hooked it up. And then you get into some that are luxury homes that could be 100,000 to 200,000. So a good takeaway, you better be damn careful when you go into a meeting room. And notice Banu, I told you she's a pro. You might not have been paying attention when she was talking through like that. Notice how she said that she put it on a non-realty addendum, which means she didn't take the assumption off the MLS, which want to get another conversation, which we don't have time for. Do you think if they just put it in the MLS that it was staying with the house, but it wasn't in the contract? Do you think that MLS is binding to that?
No.
Nope.
No. And you want to get a good ass chewing on a buyer agent? Go ahead and tell your client that no, it was in the MLS description, but I didn't put it in the contract. Watch how far that goes, and watch who ends up paying for.
Also, the MLS description, there are some shady agents out there that will go in there and change the MLS description. So our office does it separately, right? Like we have it documented, but
yeah, and we can always go back and timestamp them. But you are right; they will change it.
Sometimes they change it, but you need to have, like she said, a non-realty addendum. If you're a seller, if this is something really important, personal, right? This is your Mima's glass lamp, something or whatever.
Right.
Put it in the exclusions. That is the reason it is there. That regardless of the terms of the sale of the real property, the home, this fixture is not included with the sale. I will take it with me.
So that's a great way to end the show.
It's the managing expectations conversation that we have in every one of these radio shows, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Let them walk through with seller.
Walk it together.
Seller, right?
Is this personal? Is this something you're very emotionally attached to? Do you want, and curtains tend to be another one, right? People, I'm like, and curtains are expensive. I get it. And so if you want to take them, fine. But then like, okay, are you going to take the ballast? Are you going to take the bar? Are you going to leave it? It's a very evolved conversation, but you need to have it with your sellers, buyers, vice versa at all times.
That's a great way to summarize and end the show.
And that's why you need to hire a good agent like us.
That's right. That's right. You do, because they know these things. They know what they need to do. And I could have easily started the show off with this versus ending with it. But what Regia said and Banu said was right. We have to clarify from the beginning. You can look at this whole past hour as irrelevant because the contract dictates itself. But if you're a veteran agent, you should be going through and you should know what the questionable items are. For instance, if one of these guys are going in there, if I'm going in there, if I'm walking a house, they said it too. If I see a chandelier that is not the typical, I am immediately asking, hey, what are y'all doing with that? I go, well, because a lot of people take that down and then put a cheap fixture back up. I need to know what you're doing with it. I saw you had some Bose speakers back in there. What are y'all planning on doing with that? What are y'all doing with that outside TV mount that's into the cement where you don't have a hook? Good real estate agents do that. And the whole purpose of this show is to advise you, give you a heads up that you need to know those things so that when you go in there, you're able to identify them. And this goes both sides. If you're the listing agent, you need to know what they are. And if you're the buying agent, you need to know what they are. And you have to follow through because just like Banu said, you have to have an expert. We are the ones who manage this process. And if we're managing this process, these pieces, these fixtures or exclusions fall under our umbrella. And we need to make sure they're done right. It's funny. A simple show about real versus personal property. Most people would say that's a 10-minute conversation. We actually could go on for another 2 hours. There are so many things. We didn't even get into the putting and placing of special provisions in or putting personal property in special provisions. There are a lot of agents that love to pull that stunt, which you can identify pretty quick their level of education or continuing education for some, that they did not do that at all. So that's hugely important. I was going to say something else, but I'm not going to do that. I'll talk about that on next time around. Look, I want to thank both of you guys for coming on. I love the show. I never even have enough time with you, but it's always great. The show's always good when you guys are on. such a great topic for everybody that was listening today. I promise you, if you go back and really listen to some of the things we're talking about, that's going to be a real big help. There were at least 2 or 3 fundamental takeaways. There are a lot of takeaways, but there were 3 fundamental ones that you should know from a legal standpoint and a negotiation standpoint that really should have made this episode worthwhile. I want to thank everybody out there for tuning in. Always share the show with everybody. Tell everybody else out there, hey, look, you really got to watch this. It's helpful, especially if you're a new agent. Tell your peers that you guys always meet, saying, hey, look, I watch this guy and these gals all the time. I think they're great. You should pass it on. It really does help grow the show, and it really does give a lot of people help that they probably need. And that goes for your clients too, especially those of you right now that are in a listing appointment or a buyer where they're about to put a contract in. You guys should be talking to them about this. Let them know this so that they know what to look for when they go out there. They will be much better informed. And when they're much better informed, that means you did the job that you were supposed to. Y'all take care. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks for watching.